This is my presentation on fatigue and recovery. So what is fatigue? Fatigue can be defined as extreme tiredness due to physical exertion. There are different factors that happen when you are fatigued. These are aching muscles, it can also cause injury, shortness of breath, muscle tiredness, and it can also lead to poor technique in performance, so like technique when swinging your racket in tennis. You can also mentally feel tired as well. The amount of fatigue is determined by the intensity and duration of the sport. It's more likely to feel fatigued running 8,000 meters than playing tennis, and you are likely to fatigue quicker running 400 meters than just playing a game of football. The factors are lack of sufficient oxygen to the working muscles, leading to them working anaerobically and tiring as they have no energy supply. Your breathing rate can't keep up with the work of the muscles. Another factor is the build-up of lactic acid. As you lack oxygen to get rid of it from the muscles, it builds up, causing aching and leading to fatigue and tiredness in the muscles. Also, a lack of sufficient amount of sleep and rest can cause you to fatigue much quicker, as you aren't physically or mentally prepared. There are three types of fatigue. One of them is local fatigue. This is specific in the muscles like biceps or quadriceps and can occur with specific exercises like a bicep curl or a squat. There is also general fatigue, which is full body fatigue, and it's basically like tiredness all over. It occurs more in game sports like rugby or football, as you are using your whole body for a prolonged period of time at higher intensities. The final type of fatigue is chronic fatigue. This occurs with overtraining and not enough recovery. This means you exercise at high intensities and you do not have sufficient amount of rest to recover from the exercise. This can occur if you train every day and don't have a rest day. We're going to move on to maximal exercise and very short duration. My example I'm going to use is 100 meters in powerlifting. So at high intensity and long durations, the systems used would be for 100 meters would be ATP and PC, as these systems last the same amount as the event. Anaerobic work, so energy sources would be as much used in the event. You wouldn't fatigue during the event, but you need to allow resynthesis for ATP and PC, as running again straight after may cause a build-up of lactic acid and fatigue. With powerlifting, you would just use ATP as it's short bursts of maximal exercise. As it's an extremely short duration with no energy sources, you will take to use, and fatigue won't occur during the repetition. Waste products and fatigues aren't likely to occur if, in between sets, there is time taken for the ATP to resynthesize. If not, and more reps and weight is used, then there will be likely local fatigue and muscles used, and lactic acid may begin to accumulate. Performance isn't commonly affected with these sports. However, if there is an occurrence of fatigue, then a person may feel ache in their muscles and begin to being used. Mentally, they may want to stop, and the technique may not be as correct as they are beginning to feel tiredness within their muscles. Moving on to ATP and PC depletion. With the 100 meters, the athlete will completely deplete their ATP system, as it only lasts around 7 to 10 seconds. And the event lasts longer than this. PC will also be used a bit, but not as much, so depletion is very minimum and low duration. Once the athlete has completed their events, they will then be left with ADP in their muscles. They will then need to use aerobic systems to reattach the phosphate bound to the ADP to resynthesize it and once again make ATP. PC will need to be resynthesized with phosphocreatine kinase. With a powerlifter it is different, as there's only need to use ATP, and therefore you would only need to resynthesize this by putting the triphosphate back on to the ADP to form ATP. This means they will recover much quicker. There are ways of avoiding fatigue during this exercise. One way is creatine supplication. This is a natural substance normally in the form of a tablet or powder. It helps avoid and reduce the fatigue symptoms, and it can also increase power and performance, which is good for sprinters and powerlifters. It is fast and effective, and however, it's not useful for longer events, and there may be side effects of using these. It is effective for short, intense exercises though, so it's good for these two types of events. And now moving on to recovery. The recovery requirements for this event is fast recovery, so alactic recovery, so you recover quicker as you are only resynthesizing certain things, like ATP. The timescale will be about 10 to 20 minutes before you are fully resynthesized, but it does depend on the reps and sets used. Moving on to the graph data. The graph here shows the pre-exercise and recovery phase. As you can see on the graph, the VO2 is the oxygen consumption, which is the curve that is actually consumed during the exercise. The straight line is this. The straight line above is if we were perfect, and the gap between that is the oxygen deficit. This is the amount we can't use, and at this point we would be working anaerobically. The lotted line is the VO2 max, which is the max amount the athlete can intake. After the exercise bit, there is the curve, which is the EPOC, which is the excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So it's the extra VO2 consumed or used above the resting levels in recovery. The curve is dropping down is the recovery phase of the oxygen consumption. The drop is until it reaches resting levels. Your EPOC is used to consume enough to resynthesize the energy systems and to rid of the waste products, which is the heavy breathing in post-exercise. In terms of the 100 meters and a powerlifter, they work anaerobically for a bit, and so the VO2 isn't as high in this short endurance events. At EPOC, they will use the fast alactic recovery as the systems used to recover the ATP and the PC. It will also rid of slight lactic acid, but it's very little, as it will be a fast recovery. It correlates as fast as the exercise has fast recovery. Below the line here would be the resting levels, which is where that's dropped to and where it starts. Moving on to the next event is the moderate intensity and moderate duration exercise, which is the 800 meters. When we analyse the 800 meter run, there is a difference between the previous analysed events. This event would require us to use our stored ATP and PC systems and our lactic acid system. The source of energy that would be required would be mainly carbohydrates, and the waste products would include ADP, phosphorus, and creatine, and also lactic acid. During the exercise of moderate intensity and moderate durations, our bodies will need to rely on different fuel sources on the duration and intensities. For example, an event like the 800 meters sprint would require an athlete to use the carbohydrates as fuel to be able to use the lactic acid system effectively. When looking at the RER reader on the graph for an event like the 800 meters, with its intensity and duration, the reading would be about at 1. This is since it is relying on pure only carbohydrates as a fuel source, as it is using no fat. It would be 100% carbohydrates and no use of fat. This is the reason the RER will be at 1. By using the lactic acid system, there are problems as it can affect an athlete's performance. By this I mean, by using this, there will be a build-up of the production in the muscles of the athletes. Lactic acid contains hydrogen ions, and if they are left in the muscles, they can experience pain, as they are highly acidic. This will cause fatigue or pain in muscles used, so for example in this sport it would be in the legs. This will occur during the event, but mainly near the end and slightly afterwards. Due to both the intensity and duration is moderate, It makes it very, very challenging, meaning mentally you will feel tired near the end after. Now moving on to the body effects. Your acidity and pH levels will increase as you exercise for longer. This is because of the build-up of waste products and lactic acid. It is very acidic and will make these levels increase. The pH will increase as the acidity does because the alkaline is decreased. The hydrogen ions accumulation will occur in the muscles as you begin to fatigue. They will accumulate in the muscles and, if not shifted, can be very, very bad for you. Lactic acid acts as a buffer and makes sure they don't just stay in the muscles. The hydrogen binds to the lactic acid, and when the lactic acid is removed in recovery, so is the hydrogen. Now looking at the OBLA. The OBLA is the onset of blood lactate accumulation. It is the point in which the blood lactate accumulation becomes extensive enough to suppress performance. The point of the OBLA depends on the training level of the athlete, but averages around 4 millimoles. Athletes will want to prolong their OBLA so that they don't reach their lactic threshold, as this will cause fatigue within the muscles once reached. This is the point in which they begin to use their lactic acid system. Lactic acid increases and lowers the pH, which means they are highly acidic. This then inhibits the enzyme activity in the glycolysis, and therefore prevents breakdown of glucose and induces fatigue. At this point, you will start to feel pain in the muscles as the event goes along. Athletes in training tend to want to prolong their threshold and increase it to aim to not be able to fatigue as long as possible, to help them improve their running, make them run faster and fatigue less. The outcomes. The effect on performance will be the same as last time. It will cause aching in the muscles, tiredness mentally and physically, and the build-up of lactic acid. Recovery types will be two types. It will be the fast alactic and the slow lactacid type of recovery. The requirements in fatigue in recovery are to rid of the lactic acid and to resynthesize the ATP, PC, and lactic acid systems. The timescale for this will be longer than the 100 meters, as it will be around an hour to resynthesize all the systems and to rid of the lactic acid buildup. To be able to avoid this fatigue, like the phosphocreatine supplementation in high intensity and short duration exercise, athletes can ingest more myoglobin in forms of drinks or edible gels to increase the amount of myoglobin in their liver and muscles, to try and help prolong the amount of time they can continue to do exercise before they feel the effects of fatigue. The graph is different as last analysed, as it shows the change in the shape with more intense and durable exercise. Everything is still in the same place. The VO2 and consumption is steeper as it covers more ground and is longer as the event lasts longer, and you would use more to keep up with the duration of the activity. O2 deficit is smaller and the VO2 is bigger. The recovery is longer as the effects are harder and needs more time to recover. The recovery uses two types, the alactic and the lactacid. The alactic is what it does for 100 meters. The lactacid is for the longer things, so like the lactic acid build-ups and the recovery of the LA system and all of the PC system. It takes longer as it has to do more, and recovery is more a complicated process. Then we move on to the lactate conversion.